I'm gonna start adding some more details to the canvas. And I've got a little stencil here that I'm gonna use as a template. And this, it's a stick-on stencil, so it's really used for glass. So I'm just going to use it to draw some flower petals in here. And then I'll remove it and we'll just paint these in. Just taking my pencil and just lightly drawing around those flower petals. Okay. I'd started trying to use it as a stencil, but it just doesn't want to stick to this canvas like it would if you were using it on glass. So first I'm going to paint the center in with some of the yellow oxide and white, mix that together. And if you're using a different shade of yellow for your blocks or whatever, you can just use whatever shade of yellow you're using. You want these little elements to be painted in with the same color palette that you've been using for the rest of the canvas. Then I'm going to paint the flower petals with, I think I want these to be pink. And again, my pink is the alizarin crimson plus a little bit of white mixed in. And you can vary that color, depending on whether you want it a darker pink or a lighter pink. You can add more white or less white to the mix. I think I'm going to start out with it a little darker to start. I want it a little brighter than what our pink on the background is. We want these little flowers to pop out a little bit more. Okay, we're going to put a cupcake up here, so I've traced that down. And let's paint our cherry. It's going to be the alizarin crimson. We'll paint the icing in with just white, plain solid white. Then we're going to make our cupcake paper. I think we'll make it the blue. So I'm going to use the cerulean blue and just paint a wash of that over this cupcake paper. Add a touch of white to that, might give it a little bit more opacity. We'll let that set up and do another coat on that once it's dry. Our flower is dry, so I'm going to float some shading around that. I'm using a little bit of my blending mix, which is a mix of glazing medium, 2 parts glazing medium and 1 part extender. I'm going to brush that over these petals in the center. It'll help blend on this canvas a little bit. The canvas is kind of rough and it's a little difficult to get the paint down in the texture. So then I'm switching to just a 1/2 inch angle brush, and I'm going to pick up some of this warm white and a little bit of our yellow oxide and use that to highlight the center a little bit. I'm just going to side load around one side of that. So the yellow oxide's on the heel of my brush, and this is a double load, and the the warm whites on the long tip, and that helps them to blend together. So we add a highlight to that center, and then I'm going to go back and shade our petals a little bit more with some of the blending mix and alizarin crimson. I'm just going to come back and float that along the petal against the center. And you can walk it out on your petals a little bit more if you want the petal to be a little brighter. We can let that set up and dry. It'll take a little longer to dry since we have that extender medium in there. But you can see what how pretty that is to float with that blending medium. It's a little more the consistency of your paint, and I feel like it gives you a much smoother float when you're adding color like that. So I'm going to do the same thing on the cupcake. We can add some of that blending mix to the cupcake paper. And then we can use some of that blue and float a little bit more of that here underneath the icing. Let's double load the brush, and we'll put some white on the other end. I want to go to a lighter blue color, not so straight white. So let's letting the light side of the brush turn towards the center of the cupcake paper, and that'll help give it a highlight down the center. Even pick up a little bit more and work it in here into this blending medium. Run blue over here to shade this side. I can pick up more white here in the center and blend that in. Wipe your brush every once in a while if you get too much paint, because if we kept working too much white up here, we would lose all of our shading underneath that icing. So I just want to soften that out. Now the cherry, we can add a little black shading to that. If we pick up a little touch of black on our brush, blend it here, and then pick up some of that alizarin crimson. We'll work that together. It'll give you kind of a black cherry color. And we can float that down the left side and across the bottom against the icing. And put a little bit here in this center dimple. You can speed your drying time up with a hairdryer. Of going to highlight the cherry with a lighter pink color, so I'm going to mix the alizarin crimson and some little bit of white to make a lighter pink. We're just going to highlight this top edge. We'll build this up a couple times. This will be our first darker pink. And when that dries, we can come back with just a little bit lighter. And we can shade our icing some with the medium white that we used in some of the background colors. So I'm going to come along here and shade some on the side. A little here on some of these bottom little dips. And walk some into our center here. This is a soft float where I'm laying the paint down and then I'm flipping the brush over so that the edge with the paint meets, and I'm brushing that together and letting that soften out so they blend out on either side, just to give a little soft shadow here where the icing is puffed or dipping. And you can also use the blending medium for this. It'll give you a little more time to work the paint. So I'm adding these little shadows where the icing kind of curves in. We'll go back to our cherry and add just a little more highlight. So I'm going to use some alizarin crimson and mix up a light pink that's a little lighter than what we first put down, just to have a little stronger highlight. I'm just going to pinch the end of my brush so I don't have that residue. And we could actually go back and add a little sparkle of white on those to give it a little more of a shine mark. And we can add a little green stem. Clean the bottom of this icing up a little bit. And I'm going to float some of this green on the cupcake paper. Make it add some little shadows, like the little ridges in the cupcake paper. I'm using some of that extender and blending medium. And then to help finish that off and crisp up the edges, I'm just going to do some very fine outlining in black. I'm using a 20-aught liner and working just up on the tip of my brush with paint that's been thinned with water, so it's very inky. And I'm just going to just very loosely run around the edges of that icing. I'm not even trying to hit exactly on the edge. It can break on and off and do the same thing around the cupcake paper. And some of the little, along the green floats that we did. After I line with black, I like to go back and reline again, but with white. And again, the same way. It's very inky white paint. And I'm not trying to follow the exact line of the black. I'm just crisscrossing and hitting it here and there. It just breaks up that black outline so it's not so stark. On the cupcake paper, I'm lining just to the left of the black line to make this like a highlight on these ridges. Then one final thing I'm going to do on the icing with some extender medium is I'm going to take a little bit of this pink color. I don't want very much of it, just a hint of this pink, and float some pink accents on this icing. We're going to go back down here to our flower. I've got, again, some of this blending medium in my brush. And I'm going to pick up, I think, a little bit of the warm white. Work that on my palette and float some of that on the ends of the petals. I worked up some lighter pink, and let's do some little detail strokes on the petals. These are just comma strokes. I'm blending up a lighter yellow color, and I'm going to add a few more of these little strokes in between the petals, kind of overlapping. But you can see how that gives the flower so much more dimension. Let's add some more little details. We can do some white dots around the center, like little seeds around the center of the flower. And if we take some of the blue blue-green light and mix that with some of that yellow that we've just made, we can make a pretty leaf color and actually do some little scrolly leaves out from the flower. Let's go up to this little dot up here and let's paint that in with the yellow. We'll make another flower up here. This one will make a blue flower because we used pink on this side. I used the blue and just a little bit of that blue-green light. And then let's stroke a lot of petals in. Just putting some more petals in, just lighter ones that I've added more white to the mix. This is sort of like a big straw flower. With the yellow mix, we're going to paint some sunburst strokes above the I in spice. And then we're going to do some filler flowers in pinks. The centers are yellow, again, your yellow mix, and we're going to do a pink mix and paint the petals using a small flat brush. You can use a size, maybe a 4 or a 6. Just fill in all your little filler flowers in the same manner. We're going to do some detailed outlining around the large flower using black on a liner brush. I like a 20-aught liner, and just make these strokes very fine and loose around the petals. It'll give you just some little added dimension to the flower. I'm circling the little white seeds in the center. And I'm going to outline the centers and petals on the smaller pink flowers. Repeat this for all of your filler flowers. We're going to do some shading on the centers of the yellow, on the pink flowers, the little yellow centers. I'm just side loading with some of the alizarin crimson. I'm using just a small 1/4 inch angle brush. And then I'm going to do just a little more shading on the word girls. I'm using a round brush and the medium white and just stroking down along the left and bottom of each of the letters. So give like a little cast shadow next to each one. We're going to stop at this point and move on to the next video, which will be the teddy bear.